Why did you shatter me, Kody? Why did you leave me with nothing? Not even my house? Those were not just words that filled the courtroom. They sliced through it like a knife, cutting the silence, ringing out into every crevice until no one was brave enough to even breathe. Meri Brown's voice shuddered as she recited them. But shuddering was not weakness. Shuddering was pain tempered into strength. Each syllable was suffused with decades of heartbreak, humiliation, and betrayal. Her cracked voice, yet commanding, pierced the ears of 12 shocked jurors who sat paralyzed, their eyes wide open, as if they'd just been hit by lightning. At the judge's bench, the gavel lay still in his hand, although his knuckles were clenched about it. He leaned forward, brows drawn up, his face hardening with interest. Judges heard 1,000 first lines. But this one carried weight. This one burned. In the other side of the room, on the defendant's side, Kody Brown shifted restlessly in his seat. He had entered this courtroom swaggering, as always, the same conceit that had propelled him all these years of cameras, interviews, and the fantasy of a utopian polygamous kingdom. But today, his posture gave him away. His spine was stiff, his arms crossed too tightly over his chest, and his jaw set like stone. His face, normally smeared with a self-satisfied half-smile, was gradually reddening. The media cameras, assembled in the gallery like stilled vultures, zoomed in with perfect promptness. All media desired this image. Kody Brown, the patriarch, the supposed family leader, suddenly cornered by the very woman, once his first wife, his companion, his foundation, and now, his accuser. The jury leaned in, almost in unison. Their pens hovered above their notepads, but for a long moment, none of them wrote a single word. They were transfixed. The weight of Mary's opening cry hung in the air like smoke from a fire that could no longer be contained. The judge cleared his throat, shattering the silence. "Go ahead, Mrs. Brown," he said quietly, as if even his power was moderated by the freshness of her hurt. Mary's chest rose and fell, her breaths heavy, visible. She took a step forward, her heels clicking against the polished wood floor. It was a sound that echoed too loudly in the silent room, a reminder of just how alone she had felt for so many years. Alone in her marriage, alone in her pain, and now, at last, not alone in her truth. She looked over at the gallery, where members of the general public sat, many of whom were devoted followers of the family's now defunct television show. Some faces were shocked, some nodded in sympathy, and then there were those who just looked away, unable to look her in the eye, embarrassed at how long they had neglected her suffering. Meri returned her gaze to the jury. She did not scream, did not rave. Her words were calculated, quiet, yet each one held an edge that cut deeper than any scream ever could. For years she started, her tone low but unshakable. I remained silent. I remained hidden. I told myself sacrifice was love, patience was loyalty, waiting would make me worthwhile. She hesitated, swallowing hard. Her hand touched the wooden witness stand, steadying her. But each day, I saw the man I married, the man I trusted, slowly erase me. He gave my space, my worth, to somebody else. He took the home I built with him, the place I poured my heart into, and left me with only memories. Memories that haunt me even now. Her voice broke on the final word. A wave of feeling moved through the box of jurors. Some of them gazed down at their hands, not wanting the burden of her sorrow. One woman touched her eyes with a tissue. Kody shifted once more, his attorney hunched beside him, furious whispers in his ear. But Kody's gaze never wavered from Meri. It seared her like a flame, burning with anger, defensiveness, and perhaps, just perhaps, a spark of fear. Meri saw it. She straightened her shoulders. "Telling you this," she said, sweeping her arm across the courtroom, "is not only about property. It's not simply about documents or signatures. This is about dignity. This is about truth. And this is about a man who believed he could smash me, shut me up, and continue on as if I never breathed." The judge's eyebrows furrowed, his pen tapping softly against the bench. The room was utterly still again, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Mary's lawyer, sitting just behind her, nodded slowly, silently encouraging her to keep going. But Meri didn't need encouragement. The words were flowing now, not rehearsed, not polished, but raw and unstoppable, like a flood breaking through a dam. I remained quiet because I believed that quiet made me powerful. I believed quiet kept my family safe. But quiet only shielded him. She nodded straight at Kody. Gasp came over the room. Her hand shook, yet her eyes did not. They remained fixed on his, penetrating his shields. You shattered me, Kody. Piece by piece, you shattered me. With each deception, each treachery, each calculating glance that said I wasn't enough. And when I had nothing more to offer, you didn't merely turn your back. You left me with nothing. Not my house, not my value, not even the dignity I was owed as your wife. The silence was stifling now. Even the camera clicking had slowed. The photographers nearly too shocked to snap their shutters. Kody finally got up. He slammed his hand on the table, the noise echoing in the room.
That's not true.
He bellowed, his voice thundering with rage. She walked away from me. She left this family. I didn't leave her. She gave me up. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, whispers, the creaking of chairs. It was pandemonium. The judge pounded his gavel 3 times. Order! Order! The room fell silent once more. But the tension was now more intense than ever before. Meri did not blink. She did not even move. Slowly, purposefully, she resumed her focus on the jury. See? She whispered, her voice trembling but this time with restraint, not terror. That's the man I shared my life with. That's the man I sacrificed my life to. A man who screams when confronted by truth, who accuses others when his own conscience emerges. The eyes of the jury were on her once more. The spell held. This isn't merely a divorce case, she asserted, her tone now resolute, her words rumbling like thunder. This isn't merely the dissolution of a marriage. This is the fall of a kingdom founded upon deceit. And today, in this court of law, I will no longer remain silent. Today, I will reveal to you who Kody Brown really is. The last words hung over the room, resonating like a prophecy. Meri took a step back, tears welling in her eyes, but not falling. For the first time in years, she wasn't standing as the broken wife of Kody Brown, but as the woman who would bring him justice at last. The jury leaned forward. The judge gripped his gavel tightly, and Kody Brown sat rigid, his expression wiped of confidence. For the first time he knew, it wasn't his show any longer. It belonged to Meri. The gavel fell once, the stinging crack ringing like thunder. Go on, Mrs. Brown, the judge instructed, his voice steady but charged with interest. Meri took a deep breath, calming herself. Her heart was pounding against her chest, but she was not going to allow her fear to dictate her anymore. For years she had been silent, but now the courtroom provided her with something she hadn't had for a long time, a crowd that was finally listening. She advanced, her heels making soft clicking sounds on the highly polished wooden floor. Her shaking hands clutched the railing of the witness stand, but her voice rang through the quiet. I gave him everything, Meri started, her voice soft, raspy and laced with grief. My love, my loyalty, my youth, my trust. I believed in him when no one else did. I stood by his side when people ridiculed us. And I gave up time and time again, for the family we vowed to build together. She glanced down briefly, swallowed hard, then looked up at the jury. But rather than being revered, I was eliminated. Rather than being cherished, I was substituted. And when I had no more to offer, he stole the one thing that belonged to me, my residence. Gasps of shock circulated throughout the courtroom gallery. A juror leaned forward in her seat, her eyes drawn into a narrow pointed expression. Another shook her head slowly, as if hardly believing it. Kody's attorney stood at once, his tone crisp and practiced. Objection, Your Honor. This is emotional manipulation, not fact. The judge raised an eyebrow, pausing only briefly before replying. Overruled. The witness may continue. A smirk twitched across Meri's lawyer's face. This was her moment. Meri's hands still trembled, but her words grew stronger. That house. It was not merely walls and bricks. It was safety, hope. I gave every bit of myself to make it a home for our children, our family. Every memory, birthdays and holidays and quiet mornings was linked to those walls. And when he abandoned me, He did not merely walk away from a marriage. He took that place from me as well, leaving me with nothing. The courtroom remained heavy with silence, the sort that weighed down all shoulders. Even the air seemed heavy, laden with her sorrow. Then, as if with a clap of thunder, Kody slammed his hand down on the table. His face was red, his voice thundering. "That's not true," he bellowed. "She walked out on me. She abandoned this family, not the other way around." Gasps again erupted. The judge pounded his gavel. "Mr. Brown, you will be silent until spoken to. That is not your time to talk." But the harm had been completed. The explosion lingered in the air, exposing the jury to the fissures in Kody's confidence. Meri looked at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "No, Kody," she replied in a low voice, and her words cut like a knife. "You were gone a long time before I walked out. You left me with every chilly stare, every cruel word, every time you put someone else before me. You were gone a long time before I ever set foot outside that door." The gallery buzzed with whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. A cameraman zoomed in on Meri's face, capturing the quiet devastation in her eyes. Meri turned back to the jury, her voice quieter now, almost breaking. "Do you know what it's like to be in your own house and feel like a stranger? To prepare meals for a family that no longer sees you? To stay up at night, wondering what you did wrong, why you're not enough, when the man who vowed to love you has already moved on?" A tear at last escaped down her face. She didn't brush it off. She allowed the courtroom to witness her hurt. "That wasn't just a house," she whispered. "It was my life. And when he took that away from me, he didn't just leave me homeless. He left me broken, empty." For a long painful instant, no one in the courtroom stirred. The weight of her words hung in the air like smoke, choking, impenetrable. Kody shifted uncomfortably, his fists ringing on the table. His lawyer spoke in his ear once more, trying to calm him down, but his jaw clenched and his leg bounced wildly under the table. The picture of a confident, untouchable patriarch was slipping by the minute, with each word spoken by Meri. The judge leaned back in his chair, regarding her intently. He drummed his pen against his notes but did not speak. He didn't have to. The jury was already in awe of her every statement. At last Meri's attorney stood from his chair. "Mrs. Brown," he said softly, "in your own words, what are you requesting this court to grant you?" Meri breathed shakily. Her shoulders rose and fell, and when she spoke once more, her voice sounded with sorrow and with defiance. "I want my dignity back. I want the truth to be spoken, and I want what was mine returned, because I might have been broken, but I will not be erased." The gallery gasped once more. Some of them even applauded before the judge banged his gavel. "Order. There will be no outbursts in my courtroom." But the impact was certain. Meri had asserted command of the story. Her agony had become her strength. As she returned to her seat, her attorney placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. She glanced down at her shaking hands, but a flicker of courage shone in her eyes. The courtroom was no longer Kody's stage. It belonged to Meri, and though the battle had just begun, the first blow had already landed, and it cut deeper than Kody ever expected. The courtroom buzzed like a hive. After Meri's testimony, reporters scribbled furiously, jurors shifted in their seats, and the gallery whispered as though they had just witnessed the crumbling of a man once thought untouchable. But Meri wasn't finished. Her attorney, a tall man with keen eyes and a soothing voice, stood up slowly. He held in his hand a dull manila envelope. It was dull, almost brittle, but the tension that hung in the air, as he deposited it on the judge's desk, was anything but brittle. "Your Honor," the attorney stated firmly, "in this envelope are papers that substantiate Mrs. Brown's allegations. Evidence that Mr. Brown did not only betray her emotionally, but financially too." The room gasped as one. Even the pen of the judge hung poised mid-tap. Kody Brown, having leaned back in his chair with forced swagger, sat bolt upright. His face went white. His attorney leaned over him, whispering wildly. But Kody's gaze remained fixed upon that envelope, which seemed to him as a ticking bomb. Meri sat in silence at the stand, folded hands, labored but steady breathing. For years she had been living in Kody's shadow, her voice ignored, her value devalued. But now she was in possession of something he could not command. The judge's eyes grew narrower. "Mr. Turner," he addressed Meri's attorney, "what type of documents are we talking about?" Turner adjusted his glasses. Financial records, Your Honor. Records that demonstrate how Mr. Brown diverted family money, wasted assets, and acquired properties in his name, and left Mrs. Brown with nothing. Documents that attest to this not being just neglect. It was outright deception. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Impossible. No way. Did he do that? The judge lifted his gavel but did not bring it down. Instead, he turned to Kody. Mr. Brown, is there something you'd care to comment on before I go over these files? Kody leapt to his feet, his voice thundering with anger and desperation. This is a setup. She's lying. This is payback because she couldn't deal with the truth about our family. None of this is true. His attorney pulled at his sleeve, attempting to soothe him, but Kody pulled away, his maniacal waving only serving to make him appear more crazed. Meri, who remained in her seat, spoke quietly, her words slicing through his fury like a shard of glass. If it's not real, Kody, then why are you so scared of what's in the envelope? The gallery exploded once more. Cameras snapped incessantly. The jurors edged forward, their expressions revealing curiosity, even suspicion. Kody froze, his lips parting but no words escaping. His eyes darted from the envelope, to the judge, to Meri, then back again. For the first time, the confident patriarch seemed cornered, trapped in a cage of his own making. The judge finally struck the gavel. Order in this court. He turned to Meri's lawyer. The court will recess. These documents must be reviewed before proceedings continue. The gavel fell once more, swift and decisive. Recess is 1 hour. The courtroom break. The courtroom dissolved into bedlam, as individuals stood up, hushed, and dashed out into the corridors. Reporters buzzed like a swarm of bees, eager for sound bites, their cameras flashing as they attempted to capture Kody's desperation and Meri's serenity. Kody marched intently toward his attorney, his evident but still intelligible. How could you let this happen? You said she had nothing. His lawyer whispered furiously. I didn't know she had this. If those records are authentic, you're in serious trouble. Meri stood quietly by the witness stand, her hands still trembling but her heart steady. For the first time in years, she had the upper hand. She didn't speak to the reporters. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than Kody's rage. A reporter yelled out, Meri, what is in the envelope? What is the evidence? She just gazed at Kody and spoke quietly. The truth, the reopening of court. 1 hour later, the courtroom resumed. The mood had changed. The whispering had become speculation, the speculation suspicion. The judge appeared, his face inscrutable. Everyone sat waiting, the air thick enough to strangle on. The judge cleared his throat. The court has considered the papers filed by the counsel of Mrs. Brown. Each head leaned forward. Each breath seemed to be suspended. The eyes of the judge found Kody, as piercing as a knife. These records establish that Mr. Brown stole money from joint accounts into personal ownership, used family resources to gain title to property in his own name alone, and hid these activities from Mrs. Brown. These are not minor discrepancies. These are serious breaches of trust. Gasps rocked the room like an earthquake. Kody's face paled. His lips opened, then snapped shut once more. He was a man in a storm without a haven, his bravado stripped of all subtlety. Meri's eyes shone, not with tears now, but with something much, much stronger, vindication. The judge's voice rolled across the courtroom like thunder. This evidence will be taken into account in its entirety. Court will reconvene with witness testimonies tomorrow. For now, Mr. Brown, you would do well to speak to your counsel. The gavel came down. The consequences of the revelation. The courtroom cleared once more, alive with tension. The press was abuzz. Out front, cameras blazed and microphones thrust forward, all clamoring for a headline. Kody rushed past the throng, his anger contorted on his face. This is a witch hunt, he snarled. This is not over, but the world had witnessed his fear. As for Meri, she strolled out deliberately, shoulders squared, stride firm. The bursts of cameras trailed behind her, but she didn't waver. It was the first time in a very long while that she felt solid ground beneath her feet. Gossip traveled like wildfire. What is in the remaining documents? Did he actually steal from her? Could this collapse everything? Meri remained silent. She merely tightened her purse, set her chin and passed through the destruction. In there she understood the fight was not yet over. But already the change had started. The world could no longer ignore Kody Brown's kingdom of deceit. And for the first time in years, Meri was fighting not just to survive, she was fighting to win. The courthouse was swarming with people the next morning. The steps were lined with reporters, cameras flashing as if history itself was being inked in the moment. In the courtroom, the room was filled from shoulder to shoulder, with tension hanging like a storm cloud that threatened to break. Meri entered in silence, in muted tones, a serene face with a determined look. Her eyes no longer had the despair of defeat. Instead, they bore fire. Kody, on the other hand, stormed in scowling, accompanied by his attorney, his spirit frantic and unbalanced. This was no longer merely a trial, it was a battlefield. The opening clash. The judge arrived, gavel came down, and the day started. "Mr. Brown," the judge said sternly, "you may now respond to the documents presented yesterday." Kody stood, his hands trembling slightly, though he tried to mask it with anger. His voice rose, thick with indignation. "These so-called documents are nothing but fabrications, lies crafted to destroy me. For decades I've carried this family, supported wives and children, sacrificed everything for them, and this is how I'm repaid. With betrayal?" He spun angrily towards Meri, shaking a pointed finger. You're ungrateful. All I did for you, all I supplied, and this is your payback. You disgust me." The room was filled with whispers. Some of the jurors furrowed their brows. Others leaned in, narrowing their eyes. Kody wasn't defending himself, he was launching an attack, and the crowd could see it. Meri didn't blink. She sat upright, her hands clasped neatly in her lap. When she did talk, her voice was flat, almost heartbreakingly serene. "All you ever gave me, Kody, were broken promises and empty words. I asked for love, respect and partnership. You gave me betrayal, humiliation and silence." Her sentences were daggers, not yelled in fury, but spoken softly with a gentle honesty that cut deeper than rage ever could. "The evidence strikes again." Meri's attorney stood, holding another batch of papers. "Your Honor, the papers aren't forgeries. We have obtained signed bank statements, notarized conveyances, and deeds to property, each signed and authenticated by impartial experts." He dropped the pile on the judge's desk with a report that resonated through the quiet courtroom. Kody's face went white. His attorney shuffled uncomfortably, scanning papers as if for an exit that wasn't there. The judge glanced through the papers hastily, then up, his face etched from granite. "These are valid records, Mr. Brown. If you would dispute them, you'll have to do better than mere accusations." Kody's jaw ground angrily. He pounded his fist on the table. "This is all a setup. She's out to ruin me because she couldn't deal with my decisions. I had every right to handle family finances. I was the father of the house." The words hung heavy in the room. Some jurors shook their heads. One woman on the jury even muttered, "Head of the household? Not in the eyes of the law." Meri's lawyer seized the moment. "And that, Your Honor, is the crux of this case." Mr. Brown believed he was above accountability. He used family leadership as a shield to hide selfish actions. But no one is above the truth. Meri's crossfire. The judge nodded toward Meri. "Mrs. Brown, do you wish to respond?" Meri stood up, shaking a little with her hands, but steady with her voice. "For years I lived in a home that wasn't even my own. He made me believe that it was all for the sake of the family, that I had to make sacrifices, to submit. I believed him. I sacrificed my dreams, my joy, even my identity, all for a man who based his own empire on deceit." She glared at Kody, now eyes cutting and wet with unshed tears. "You did not only shatter my heart, Kody. You shattered my home. You left with nothing, not even honor. But today I'm reclaiming it, all of it." The gallery buzzed with mutterings, some even gasps of pity. A juror quietly swiped at her eye. Reporters wrote hectically, their pens scrambling to keep up. Kody snarled, his face contorted in fury. "You're pathetic, Meri. Always the victim. You could have left any time, but you remained. You remained because you needed me." Meri shook her head slowly, as if pitying him. "No, Kody. I remained because I was committed to something greater than myself. I remained for a family you dismantled piece by piece. And when I finally did leave, it wasn't because I required you. It was because I needed to rescue myself."
The words hit like thunder. The judge's warning. The judge banged his gavel down hard. Enough. This is a court of law, not a shouting contest. The room fell silent immediately, even though the tension continued to smolder like fire. The judge glared at Kody. Mr. Brown, you will refrain from outbursts, or I will find you in contempt. Do you understand? Kody clenched his teeth, grumbling under his breath, but eventually sat down. His attorney whispered desperately, attempting to salvage the catastrophe, but the harm was evident. The jury had witnessed his hubris, his brutality, his disintegration. The witness twist just. When the courtroom was about to take a breather, Meri's attorney rose again. Your Honor, we have one final witness who wants to testify. The doors swung open, and in strode one of Kody's own children. Gasps echoed through the room. Cameras flashed hysterically. Kody's eyes grew wide with shock, then with rage. No, no, that is preposterous. My own child, I forbid it. But the judge's gavel came down again. Sit down, Mr. Brown, this witness will be heard. The boy walked up to the stand, his face an expression of pain and resolve. His voice shook, yet his words did not waver. I learned by observing how Dad treated Mom. I witnessed how he dismissed her, ignored her and belittled her. I watched the money dwindle. I watched the nights she sobbed alone. This is not about money. This is about years of emotional abuse. And I can no longer remain silent. The jury leaned forward, entranced. The gallery was still. Kody's face contorted in anger, his voice thundering. You traitor. How could you do this to me? But the harm was done. His empire wasn't merely falling. It was disintegrating from the inside out, betrayed by the very voices he had silenced years before. The cliffhanger conclusion of Session 4. The judge brought his gavel up one final time for the day. This court will recess. Tomorrow we will proceed with closing arguments. The gavel came down. The room dissolved into pandemonium, but the picture was seared into all our minds. Kody Brown, the once all-powerful patriarch, red-faced and shaking, surrounded on all sides by truth. Meri cold and firm, standing taller than ever before, and the child's testimony, hanging in the air like an indomitable specter. The war was almost over, but the coup de grace lay ahead. The next morning, the courthouse hummed with activity. Reporters pushed and shoved for space. News trucks occupied the street, and hushed conversations swirled. Today was verdict day. Within the courtroom felt more substantial than ever before. Everyone understood history was in the making. The judge appeared, his robe swooshing like a dark presence down the bench, and gavel struck wood. All rise. The jury entered, their expressions impassive. The tension was palpable. Even the air hung still. Kody sat rigid, his fists balled, his jaw clenched. He attempted to radiate confidence, but his eyes gave him away. They nervously skittered, never settling. Meri sat across from him, her carriage serene, her hands placed lightly on the table. She looked free for the first time in years. The final statements. The judge pointed to the lawyers. Counsel, you may proceed with your closing arguments. The lawyer for Kody stood up first. His voice was suave, practiced, nearly desperate. Members of the jury, what you have heard is a tale full of emotions, heartache, and yes, family disputes. But this case is not about emotion. It's about facts. And the fact is my client, Mr. Brown, took care of his family's finances for decades. Was everything an ideal decision? Maybe not, but his goal was always to shield his family, to keep them stable. He is no thief. He is no abuse. He is no abuser. He is a father, a husband, a man who did what he could with impossible choices. He stopped looking at Kody, then the jury again. Do not be blinded by emotions. Do not condemn a man for attempting to keep together a family as complicated as this one. Seek out the truth, and you will realize, Mr. Brown does not deserve to be condemned. He took his seat hastily, beads of sweat glistening on his temples. It was now time for Meri's attorney. He stood up slowly, deliberately, and approached the jury. His voice was tranquil but potent. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend is correct about one thing. This case is about truth. But the truth is not in speeches. It's in the documents, the bank statements, the deeds. It's in the tears of Mrs. Brown. It's in the testimony of a child who survived the suffering. The truth is evident. He pointed at Kody. Mr. Brown was not a guardian. He was a manipulator. He didn't guard his family's assets. He took advantage of them. He didn't take care of his wives. He destroyed them. And he didn't lose Mrs. Brown by chance. He dumped her, stripped her of her house, and left her with nothing. The lawyer's tone softened, but the gravity of it hit harder than ever. You have the authority to restore Meri Brown her unjustly stolen things. Not only a home, not only finances, but her dignity, her freedom, her truth. He stepped back, nodding strongly. We have faith that you will pierce the deception. We have faith that you will bring justice. The jury's verdict. The judge addressed the jury. You will now retire to deliberate. The jury stood up and vanished into the room. The room was abuzz with tense energy. Each second was moving at the speed of an hour. Kody walked back and forth, cursing under his breath to his attorney. He slammed his fist onto the table at one point, his anger barely leashed. Meri sat quietly, eyes shut, silently repeating a prayer, or perhaps simply preparing herself for what was about to unfold. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the jury came back. Everyone in the courtroom stood again.
The foreperson stood, clutching a piece of paper, his voice firm but full of significance. We, the jury, find in favor of Mrs. Brown. The courtroom erupted with gasps, screams, and camera flashes. Mary's eyes filled with tears, her hands covering her mouth as she exhaled in relief. Kody's face drained of all color, his body slumping into the chair as though the weight of the world had finally crushed him. The judge's final words. The judge's gavel brought silence back to the room. This court holds that Mr. Brown abused marital and family property, was guilty of financial malfeasance, and breached his duties to Mrs. Brown. Therefore, the court grants her rightful title to the disputed property, along with financial reparation. In addition, this decision establishes her independence and freedom from the control of Mr. Brown. The gavel rang down for the last time. Court is adjourned. The echo rang out like thunder. The war was won. The aftermath in courtroom. Kody burst out, banging his fists on the table. This is a sham. You can't do this to me. I'm the patriarch of this family. I built this empire. You're nothing without me, Meri. His voice was wild, broken, desperate, but no one heard anymore. The jury turned their backs. The reporters clicked their cameras on Meri, and even the judge strode out without even a backward glance. Meri stood up slowly, her lawyer beside her, and looked back at him once more. Her eyes were tears, but her voice was clear, steady, unshakable. You're wrong, Kody. You didn't create an empire. You constructed a cage, and I lived in it for far too long. Today, I escaped it. Today, I'm free. She turned and moved away, her steps measured, powerful, deliberate. Each burst of camera seemed to catch her metamorphosis. No longer the shattered wife, but a transformed woman. Outside the courthouse. The instant Meri emerged from the courthouse door, a group of reporters swarmed her, microphones held up, voices climbing over one another. Meri, how do you feel? What does this portend for your future? Do you have a word for other women in your position? She stood at the top of the courthouse steps, paused, the crowd quiet, listening for what she would say. Her voice was gentle, but it rang like a bell. For years I wondered, why did he shatter me? Why did he leave me with nothing? Not even my house. And the answer is easy. He broke me because he was able to. Because I allowed him to. But today I showed him that he couldn't break me. I am more powerful than his deception. More powerful than his lies. More powerful than his empire. She raised her chin, the sun catching her tears. To all the women who have been silenced, who have been told that they are less than they are. Hear me, you are not broken. You are not worthless. You are powerful. And one day you too will walk free. The cheering crowd filled the courthouse steps with applause. The final image as Meri walked away, surrounded by supporters. Kody finally emerged from the courthouse. His face was twisted in rage and humiliation, but no one rushed to him. No cameras turned his way. He shouted into the void, but his voice was drowned by the cheers for Meri. He was alone, exposed, defeated. Meri, however, stepped into the sunlight, The burden of years of hurt fell from her shoulders with each step. She was no longer crying out, "Why did you shatter me?" She was shouting, "You didn't shatter me at all." And as she melted into the crowd, one thing was for sure. This was not the end of her tale. This was the start of her new chapter.